You really have to let them fly.
They're yearning for alternate ways to express who they are.
It's like, I love Shaquela. Oh, Shaquela.
I'm ready for the lick.
Yeah.
Oh, it just gets me every time.
Hello, everybody. I am on my way to have this Zoom call with Felicia Swoope, Major Jackson, and Desmond Peeples. One of the questions that I am mostly excited about is I'm going to ask them how are they taking care of themselves in this moment where there is so much pain and there is so much grief. It is so crucial that we have some self-care practices that bring us pleasure, that bring us joy. So I'm going to ask them that tonight and a couple other questions. So I hope you enjoy.
I am so delighted and thrilled and elated to be in conversation with like incredible, brilliant, beautiful people. And I'm gonna let them sort of introduce themselves. I have some questions that I'm gonna ask them. We're gonna just sort of be in conversation with each other. And at the end of the conversation, we're gonna take questions from our audience. But thank you, Major. Thank you, Felicia. Thank you, Desmond, for being here. So we'll just start it out. Introduce yourselves, say your pronouns, and talk a little bit about your work. Let's start with Felicia.
Hello, I'm Felicia Swoope. I am currently an admissions officer at the Tuck School of Business, and I am a former dancer, lover of all things art. Currently a new board member at JAG Productions. Super, super, super excited because Jarvis is just giving me life every single day. I love the arts. I've been dancing since I was a little girl. I'm actually more of a producer than a choreographer. Lived in New York City for a long time and just followed my passion and did everything that I could surrounding dance, teaching, producing, arts administration. Graduated from Dartmouth many, many years ago and found my way back to Hanover to work for the Hopkins Center and enjoyed my time there. Shout out to my Hopkins Center people, and made a career change finally to Tuck Admissions, and I'm enjoying that. Shout out to Tuck, and that's really about it. Still trying to figure out how I will incorporate the arts into my life, and I had a discussion with Jarvis many, many months ago, about a year ago, and now he's provided me with an opportunity to sit on his board and continue to support artists. So thank you, Jarvis, for that. Happy to be here with these amazing artists.
Beautiful. All right, Desmond, you're next.
All right, thank you so much, Felicia. I'm really glad to be here with everybody. I'm Desmond Peeples. My pronouns are they, them, their. I live in Hardwick right now, and I am from Brattleboro, Vermont. And let's see, I'm a writer. Right now I'm really into so-called hidden histories. I've been doing a lot of looking into early modern queer life and writing historical fiction. I'm also the founding editor of Mount Island, which is a publisher of rural LGBTQ plus and POC voices. Let's see, we just had our first poetry prize for Rural Poets of Color, which Major Jackson judged. Thank you so much, Major. We're going to be announcing those winners very, very shortly. And I'm also the content manager for the Vermont Arts Council. That's pretty recent. Started in March, just before the quarantine started. And through that, I've been able to do more of what I do through Mount Island, which is amplify voices of color in Vermont. We do several programs focused on Vermonters from diverse backgrounds. And now we're going to be doing that even more. So that's me right now.
Beautiful. Thank you.
It's such a pleasure to be here with everyone, Felicia, Jarvis, Desmond, particularly under the auspices of the Vermont Humanities Council, which is a organization that's been near and dear to my heart, particularly from my many years on the board, but also as board chairman. That says a lot because much of my work is primarily as a poet. That's my born love, but I've been in the past the arts administrator, as well as I was just going through some archives, realizing at one point I was even doing some arts writing, which is trippy to imagine myself back in those years. I teach at the University of Vermont and also serve as poetry editor of the Harvard Review. And I'm just really thrilled that this conversation is happening, because I really do feel as though one of the hidden gems and treasures of Northern New England is the arts community, and both the artists that come through here, but maybe even more so those who have made this place their home. So I'm really excited to engage in conversation. I also occasionally write essays, judge contests. Thank you, Desmond. I'm so happy you guys envisioned such a prize, and it's just thrilling to be with folk, capital F.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I was going to ask you all this at the beginning of the conversation, but if you can with one word, just like describe right now, like how you're feeling in this moment. One word.
Well, only because I recently wrote this, but I was talking about feeling a sense of exhaustion a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, after the events that woke us up as a nation, indeed as a species. I felt exhausted. I felt there was a level of familiarity to it. I felt like we went through this 2018, 2016, 2015. But of late, I am feeling a sense of renewed passion and excitement and enthusiasm, because I'm contemplating how the arts can be central to some of the necessary change, as well as shifts that are about to happen. I think it's exciting. So that's where I'm. You said one word.
You know what? I got a lot.
You said one word, and here I go.
You know what? In this moment, we can do and say whatever we need. There's no rules. So yes, it's all right.
Exuberant. How about that?
Exuberant. Okay. All right. All right. I like that.
Yeah, exhausted was going to be my word. But there is, also so much hope and energy. And, more so by every encounter that I have like this, and by every conversation that I have with my white peers, that makes me feel like we're actually, this time is a little bit different. So you definitely more than one word right now. Yeah.
I agree with both Major and Desmond. Definitely exhausted. I had a moment today where I was talking to a friend on the phone and my voice was starting to fail, and I was just like, I am tired. I'm very tired. And yet, I mean, it's kind of the way we live as Black people. You're tired, you're exhausted, you're hurt, you want to cry, but that's not who we are. We feel exhausted, yet we feel inspired. And I cannot find one word, but it's through that exhaustion that we find our inspiration and we create work and we try to help others. So it's every day is like a range of emotions. You're tired, you want to cry when you see yet another case. And then you talk to artists and you realize that they're creating work that will come out of this pandemic and just transform the world. So today, I'm extremely hopeful.
Beautiful. I think that particularly in this moment, right? Like there's so much pain, there's so much grief, there's so much rage. And for me, I have experienced all of that, like just all of you, right? And I've been tapping into and in conversation with myself of like, how am I going to balance that rage and that anger and really evaluating and taking stock of like my pleasure and my joy, right? And like how am I waking up every day to make sure that like, yes, I'm going to use my voice and my work to be a part of the revolution. I'm super interested in reform. I can care less about using this moment to like advance, my career, right? You know what I mean? I want reform. I want a different world. And so, lately I've been thinking about joy and I've been thinking about pleasure to, sort of to balance some of that rage and some of that pain. And, a lot of my work, and there's a lot of pain in the work, right? Because it comes with telling the story of being Black in this country. And so my question is like, what are your self-care practices? How are you taking care of yourself in this moment?
So I've been doing a lot of things. I think at the beginning, because I was trying to adjust to everything that was happening, I wasn't really taking care of myself. And so now, working at home is very strange. And every day I try to have some sort of touch point with other people, artists or not, coworkers, and not on Zoom, like to actually go outside and see them, whether it's going to the Lebanon track and pretending that I'm working out, or like having a socially distanced cocktail. Sometimes it's just sitting with my creator and talking to him and praying and trying to figure out, like, what do you want me to do? Like, that gives me probably the most comfort, but really reaching out to people and thinking about, just like you, Jarvis, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to push along reform? What do I need to do to help my fellow artists? What is my charge? And I know what it is. I've always kind of known what it is, but now is really the time to put my money where my mouth is and start making moves that are different. Mm-hmm. So self-care, thinking about the future, making sure that I'm in contact with people, even though we're quarantined, and watching videos of some of my favorite performances, like revisiting those spaces, and just doing things like this.
Beautiful.
Much of my self-care, like Felicia, has been gorgeously reconnecting with friends who, life is what it is, right? We suddenly find ourselves quite consumed with work and quite consumed with our projects. And I think the big reset button of a pandemic or global health crisis is to suddenly ask oneself, what is most important? And I'm realizing, like Felicia, I really enjoy how this moment has reconnected me with friends, often over cocktails. But I'm hearing about, people creating reading groups that I want to connect with over social media or in these particular platforms. There are several arts organizations for whom I'm definitely in their live streams and happy to pay for it, mainly because I didn't have to fly to New York City on a plane, stay up in a hotel. So I will definitely donate for the performances that I find myself sitting in. I'm a big outdoors person, so that meant that came earlier in the year than it normally does. That's been part of how I've been able to kind of survive. And I'm also getting into astrology. That's what you see right there as I'm looking up at the stars. Just purchased that thing right there. I'm so excited for a clear sky tonight. But I'll also say too, reading has been always a part of how I have traveled this world. I need to hear the voices and engage in the imaginative worlds of others whom bear witness, but also take me to other places beyond, particularly during a pandemic, places beyond this little area of earth that I occupy.
What are you reading right now? I think this is a question for everybody. Thank you for, I love that. Do you want to share anything that you're reading?
Well, I'm gonna wait for others because most of my reading right now is connected to work. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that after, Desmond.
Yeah. Well, reading is a lot of my self-care as well, so we'll have to get to it. I think I've tried everything, and we'll keep trying. I too am an outdoors person, and I'm really lucky to be renting a spot on somebody's sprawling farmland right now, and can kind of just walk out the door with my dog. And that to me has always been one of the joys of living in Vermont, being able to go out and see absolutely nobody. I think, my creative work has always been a part of my self-care. And as much as it's been difficult, it's hard to focus enough to fall into the kind of rhythm I need to write, I think. But just dipping in, just trying every day has been a little bit of an anchor for me as well. But really what I think has been most inspiring and fulfilling is seeing how passionately other people really want to do this work. Seeing actual things happening, actual funds popping up, mutual aid groups, people being there for each other in our community, and tearing stuff down. Yes, that's the care I need.
Burn it all down. Burn it down. Burn it down. I really respect that. This sort of mutual aid and like seeing how people are showing up. Of course, like living in a white community, I'm not just going to, give people praise for doing the bare minimum. But I think that, I just recently, I had like some outpatient surgery and like really depended on my community to support me when my family is all the way in South Carolina and a lot of my family is in New York, and just sort of the medical industry in general. They're like, oh, it's outpatient, 48 hours, you're good to go, don't lift 5 pounds for 6 weeks. It's like, no, I needed somebody in my house taking care of me. And just seeing how my community showed up for me daily was really beautiful. And it like gave me a sort of, it sort of activated my imagination for a world that I want to, like, I think that everybody should live in communities where like people will just come in your apartment and like, or go to the grocery store for you, leave it outside of your door, write little love notes and like take care of each other, and just sort of seeing how people really did show up, even during a pandemic was like really beautiful, and made me really think about like a world that I want to live in, not just like my own kind of from my own personal experience. I'm just like, it made me just think about a bigger picture, just being like, this is how it should be, you know, in moments like this. But going back to your reading, what are you reading right now?
I have
and what are you listening to music-wise?
I'm reading several books, but also essays. A friend of mine, Ed Pavlich, put out a book called Let It Be Broke. And it's an interrogation of racial coding, but through the lens of his own biography as a white man. And I think it's quite moving. A young poet who I think is just a phenomenal thinker and scholar, Joshua Bennett, his book Ode, I Want a Pub. My dear sister Rachel Eliza Griffith has a book called Seeing the Body, which is extraordinary. But I read two essays that I want to give a shout out to, and that's going back to this idea of joy, and particularly Black joy. Imani Perry published an essay in The Atlantic called Racism is Terrible, Blackness is Not, and how we inherit ways of survival to help us through these particular moments that is more leaning towards celebration than this note of kind of being, she kind of goes towards Zora Neale Hurston in a particular essay that she gave where she talks about the sobbing school. And Imani is right to kind of say, yes, things are terrible. Thanks for checking on me, white allies. But me being Black is not something to pity. Me being Black is an extraordinary subjective space to exist in, because we come to experience with this lens of understanding the possibilities, which is what you were just talking about, Jarvis. I also want to give a shout out to my dear sister Elizabeth Alexander, who has an essay in this week's New Yorker called The Trayvon Generation, which is a marvel exploration of her son's generation and how they are similarly understand this moment in keen ways, both through their music, both through their relationship to art, even as they have inherited these tragic deaths, Black deaths. Both of these are extraordinary essays that I want to give shout outs to.
What are you listening to?
Oh man, I'm just a classics kind of guy. Give me some Marvin, give me some, I keep going back to the music of my youth, Shaka,
Yes.
Sometimes you need to be reoriented that way. But my music listening is pretty rangy.
Nice. Felicia, are you reading anything in particular right now?
So I have been reading a lot of emails at work. But when I can keep my eyes open after work, I have started to read. Last week I started to read White Fragility, and I opened it up and I read a couple of pages and I had to put it down. So I'm going to come back to that probably on the weekend, because I'm just not ready for it right now. And to balance that, I started reading Michelle Obama's Becoming, because I hadn't read it yet. I've watched the documentary, but I hadn't read it. So that's what I'm reading now, just trying to have balance. I always go back to the 4 Agreements also to keep myself right and conscious of who I am and what I'm becoming all the time. And I've been listening to Raphael Sadiq a lot. He has a new album. I love Raphael Sadiq. Actually, the last time that I left New Hampshire was to go to a concert to see him in Boston. And that was in February. That's the last time that I left New Hampshire. And he has a new album called Jimmy Lee, which is dedicated to one of his many siblings who died of a drug overdose. And you would think it would be a depressing album, but it isn't. I mean, I love Raphael Sadiq. We share a birthday. Either his birthday is the same day as mine or the day after, and I'm always strangely drawn to people born at the same time that I am. And I've been loving.
When is your birthday?
May 13th.
Taurus.
And I don't know. I've been strangely drawn to him for years and years, not just because of his looks, but for his artistry. And it's kind of interesting that that album came about right now, and that I had been listening to it so intensely and attended the concert, and that was the last thing that I did. So before COVID hit. So just listening to him, being uplifted by him, the fact that he's not really demonizing his brother. He loved his brother. He idolized his brother, while the rest of the community sort of rejected him because he was sort of the crackhead on the block. And he pays homage to him in this album and still throws in a lot of like beautiful, romantic, melodic music that you can just groove to. So that's where I am right now. All about Mr. Raphael Sadiq.
Beautiful. I didn't know who Raphael Sadiq. I don't know him as an artist, but when I was looking at my phone, I just wrote that down, and I look forward to listening.
Oh, go there.
I'll send you the album. Right, Major?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Relish, and go back chronologically.
Okay.
Yeah.
All the way back.
Yeah.
Watch Insecure, because he's the music supervisor on Insecure.
Oh, really?
Watch that at all. Yes.
I didn't know that.
Any groove that you're feeling there, that's because of him.
Wow, cool.
What about you, Desmond?
Oh, let's see. Right in front of me, I've been reading Jericho Parms's collection of essays, Lost Wax. Highly recommend. Jericho is a Vermont writer, works at the Vermont College of Fine Arts, and was my teacher for a short time. Let's see. I'm also reading Ursula K. Le Guin. I'm rereading The Left Hand of Darkness. And this is a funny thing. I've been hearing people saying Ursula K. Le Guin's books, particularly Earthsea, and these are great reading for now, for this current time, because most of them have main characters of color. And I agree, they're excellent books. But you know what? Read N.K. Jemisin, or an author of color who writes these fantasy books as well. I think Ursula would have said the same thing. But those are the two I'm reading right now. In the middle of this.
What are you bopping to?
What am I bopping to? Really, random, whatever Spotify is kind of telling me to. But I have this song stuck in my head. Does anybody know it? Shaquela?
No.
Oh, it's
I like the name.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's like I love Shaquela, oh Shaquela. Don't
You can continue.
Okay. But you said
I pull my hair up, oh Shaquela. That's all I got.
Wait, who's the artist?
I don't know. Let me look it up.
Let's look it up.
I literally do this all the time.
Cue Shaquela song right now. No, Ryan is the communications director.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Great. I was very happy to that Beyonce released a song on the evening of Juneteenth, and I've kind of been bopping Black Parade every day, which has been really nice. And then my dear friend Alka, who's also on the board of JAG, she sent me, there was a day that I was being like super extra, which is kind of typical of me. And she was like, everything's gonna be okay. And then like, you know, just sent a share album. And there's, oh gosh, I can't even pronounce her name, but it's just like, the album is called Chamber Music, and it's Balake Sissoko and Vincent Siegel. I'm just gonna, one of my favorite, I'm ready for the lick.
Right about here. Hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, it just gets me every time. It's like, it's you know, it's, I wake up, like I have like my 10 minutes like in my bed of like meditation, and it's like cue music, like foot on the floor, get up, go to my like TV stand in my apartment, pull out the incense, and just like take it all in. Like I play that. And that's my form of taking care of myself. Just this music, I love this artist. So I don't remember their names, but it's a really great album. My next, since all of us are sort of like affiliated with arts organizations, this has been a really interesting moment for me. You know, the national, global moment, but particularly locally, right? Like my work is centered in Blackness. And I think when I started this work, I would always get these like questions from people like, what does it mean to do what you do in Vermont, like in this white state, in this white space, you know? And it was always like a little bit triggering. And, you know, when you're starting something, you want to be in conversation with the community that you're serving and the people that you're serving. So, you know, I would really not want to be like dismissive. And oftentimes I would like stumble for words and like, you know, it was like sort of awkward. And, you know, the work happened, things happened, you know, the organization grew, awards happened, artists came, money was raised, and like, you know, we're in this place right now that I think that like we are an institution in White River that I think will be here, you know? And so I know, like, I feel like that we've established ourselves enough to exist. And so one of the big things that have been happening in this moment that's been really interesting is I've been getting this outpouring of emails and phone calls and inquiries from arts institutions, not only in the state of Vermont, but from elsewhere, particularly white cultural institutions, wanting to partner, wanting to engage, wanting to, you know, respond to this moment. Some of which have known about us and have not even called or whatever, and some that haven't and like really want to reach out. So I just kind of wanted to be in conversation with you all right now about like our sort of past histories, right? Working in some of these institutions and like what this moment means now. Like, how are we imagining a new way forward, and what like resources and what is needed from our allies, from these cultural institutions to protect, to amplify, and to take care of us. And you know, there's an article that came out in 7 Days today And I said a quote that like my ways of engaging with some of these cultural institutions, like my demands and my needs are way different than before. And I'm really curious to hear from you all on like, in this moment right now, this revolution, this like global crisis, this global, you know, like you were saying, Major, like there's this like global consciousness of like being woke. Like, what are some of our demands? What are some of our guidelines with some institutions, with art institutions, moving forward on how they will be engaging with us and with you?
Mm. I think first and foremost, come to the table with love. Come label with the level of like a spiritual consciousness, and a willingness, if not to enter into that vulnerable space, at least a willingness to understand that the journey we've been on has already been marked by people who have like really deep inner resources of what is just simply right. And interestingly enough, not necessarily inflected by some sort of religious consciousness, but just very simply of what it means to be human. Let's come to the table with that. Secondly, come to the table with imagination, not resorting to kind of familiar modes of, well, if we bring this artist in for a residency, then we've done our job. But in fact, what you're doing is like, there needs to be work around bringing artists that is like community, not just the vision of a curator, but it means preparing that community, resourcing that community, thinking about how that particular vision of that particular artist is going to challenge, maybe coalesce. I was thinking about resource sharing, and I was involved a couple years ago. I don't think the project is there, but when there anymore. But when Detroit was trying to rebuild itself as a city, and real estate was just like affordable, there were a group of people who were buying houses and renovating them and giving them to artists if they stayed in the house for 2 years, made modicum kind of improvements, made that their central residence. That was revolutionary. That was like serious vision there. And it's that quality of both imagination and a willingness to kind of think in ways that are going to level it, that is going to move us forward. Revolution is people kind of resist revolution. Even Black folk resist that word. But what we're talking about very simply is moving closer to what we can be as both a community and as individuals without the fetters of the past. That's why I feel like art and imagination and creativity is really central in the world. Even as school districts, even as educational institutions are shifting funding away from the arts and the humanities, this is more than a right time to kind of rethink our priorities.
I totally agree, Major. I think it is important to come to the table with love, like love conquers all, and love is also demonstrative. So if you're coming to the table with that love, put your money where your mouth is. Like, support these artists with money, with in-kind services. It's all about relationships. So if you're an arts institution, you find an artist that you're interested in, build a lifelong relationship with that artist. I had the privilege of working many years ago at Aaron Davis Hall, on the campus of City College in New York. And it's really where I started my arts administration career and producing. And I watched how the programming directors there built relationships with local artists of all genres. And those artists are some of the hottest people out there today as a result of having the support of this Black theater in Harlem. And so it has to be specifically with Black artists who have fewer commissions, fewer artists in residencies. You need to build a relationship with that artist and keep them in your family until they're able to go off into the world and have world tours. Hopefully we'll go back to that, but you have to dedicate yourself to them. You have to enter a marriage, and that marriage will feed them. They will feed you, they will make you money, and they won't forget you. So it has to be a long-term relationship, not just one performance here or there. That's what most developing artists, most emerging artists need, and even established artists in these days when the grants aren't as plentiful as they used to be. Form that common love, form that relationship, put your money where your mouth is, and hold on to them. That's what is needed.
And I think that imagination and putting your money where your mouth is it demands as big of thinking as possible from all the players involved. And I think that goes beyond just having wider representation to really hiring, to your boards, to changing the leadership of an organization, to making sure that the structural changes that are going to take years to implement have the support to be carried out over those years.
I echo that. I utterly echo that. I also feel as though, you know, when you make that marriage or that commitment, I'm thinking about my dear sister Ada Limon, who gave a talk last night among a group of people that we were engaging with this weekend at this conference. And she was talking about, as an artist, as a Latina artist, going into communities where the expectation was that she would write about her Latina-ness, and was kind of shocked and taken aback at this kind of agenda that was being set by the people who were funding her. And she was like, you know, I want to write about beauty. I want to write about nature. So that's the other thing I think needs to happen, is that if you make that commitment, you follow through on that artist's visions throughout their life, and how they may or may not speak to what you think they should speak about, but trust in how they will evolve as a person who is cherished and beloved as an artist in their community, and bring their craft to bear, bring their art to bear on who we are today. I find that to be really essential component of that relationship.
Yeah,
I think,
go ahead, Felicia.
I was just going to say that as a producer, when you select an artist, you do have to trust their vision, and you have to be confident in their artistry, and you really have to let them fly. Like, the producer is there to help shape the work, but not to direct the art, because most of the time producers aren't necessarily artists, and you want to make sure that that artist creates what is their most authentic work. And when you're surrounded by resources, it frees you up to do that. But you also want to make sure that you're not clipping their vision. And sometimes that's a difficult balance for the producer, because the producer has their agenda, the artist has their agenda, the audience wants to see a certain thing. So there's that balance. And that balance can be created in relationships. So constant conversations between the artist, between the producer, finding out what the audience is interested in. It has to be a constant conversation, but there has to be respect on all sides. And sometimes that's a difficult thing, because everybody has their agenda.
Yeah.
I love everything that y'all have said. And I think that like imagination is just so critical, like in this moment, and collaborating like with love and spirit. I think that that has always been a part of how I think about like theater making, right? Like I have always thought that like it's ministry, and that people should, you know, when you're talking about telling stories, when you're talking about, you know, sharing stories with people and that sort of connection with the audience and the actors, like I feel like it is ministry. And so in this moment right now, I just like, I refuse to engage with or collaborate when love isn't on the table, when spirit can't be brought into a process, and imagination. Like I want to be free from Western forms of theater making. Like I want to tap into, you know, what has always been inside of me that has been sort of like, you know, oppressed, essentially. Like I want to break free from those chains and those bonds that have like I want to decolonize my Black creative spirit. Like that's the journey that I'm on right now. Ryan is sending us some questions. Question is, how might Vermont schools as institutions best support and act as allies in a way forward? Really great question. I'll say that again. How might Vermont schools as institutions best support and act as allies in a way forward?
Are we talking, well, if we're talking university and colleges, I think commissions are a great way of supporting the arts, of course, and bringing in artists to, of course, I mean, we're doing this in a way, but we can be doing a lot more of it. I was going to say to be in residence, but if we're talking about at the high school level, one of the things that I miss being in a large city like Philadelphia, some of my roots were being a poet in residence, or just a young poet to kind of go in, and a lot of the young slam poets take up that work. But it'd be interesting if there were people like Desmond or fiction writers or essayists to kind of come in and have set exploratory ways of engaging students at a young age, chiefly because they're yearning for alternate ways to express who they are at this moment, separate from the pedagogy that is being foisted in positive ways, you know. But as we know, that's a vulnerable age, and the more creative outlets that they have, again, as the arts are being defunded in our schools, it's another way of supporting both artists as well as one's community. You're on mute, my friend.
Can I echo the commission part of schools? I think that, like, for me, a lot of my work I've been wanting to do like education work and being engaged with schools, but like, you know, we're in year 5 and we're, you know, a small company with big dreams. So the commissioning of these schools to get the right people to engage with their schools would be incredible. Like if a school reached out to JAG and say, hey, we want to commission you to do some education work, you know, the thing that holds us back is that we don't have capacity, right? Like, but if a school commissioned us to do something where we can hire staff, create a program, et cetera, that's a whole nother story. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I hope I get some emails from some institutions to do some work here soon.
So Jarvis, we're going to do that. I'm going to do that as your new board member. We're definitely going into the schools. We can go into elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. Arts and education is so powerful. I so believe in it. I spent a large part of my life working as a teaching artist, and probably wouldn't have left it if I weren't so upset with the New York City school system. But it's an amazing way to reach children, to develop patrons of the arts, to develop new artists, and to provide income for your organization. So think about the elementary schools, especially up here. The Hopkins Center had a great program that went into the schools and introduced these children in rural areas to culture completely different than their own. And it can be transformative. Like, we can help as artists, help these young children decide how they are going to feel about the world, and particularly how they will feel about Black people. Like, if we can bring the Black arts to them early on, we can hopefully change their minds and create better citizens. So arts and education, I think, is key. And schools, if you can find the money to bring in teaching artists, we will completely enhance your children's lives.
Yes.
I also think it's important that teachers that these artists are going into work with, they receive the support from the community that they need to carry out this, to continue the work with the kids, because they're with them every day. And so you, yeah, I mean, I think the funding is not there right now for teachers, and community needs to advocate for them, certainly. But also teachers should have, they need access to the kind of social justice training that a lot of programs aren't giving them. I'm going to give a plug to, oh yeah, Spark Teacher Education Institute, based in Brattleboro, this summer. They're having online series of workshops for anti-racist training for teachers. They are an excellent, excellent institution that's training teachers in the Southern Vermont area and that tri-state New England area for over 20 years. So anybody interested, please check them out.
Great. We have a really great segue question from, I think, someone from the Vermont Arts Council. What would y'all like to see from arts/humanities funders?
Probably not fair for me to answer because I'm on the board. So I'm going to push some agenda items there. I think funders are doing what they can do within the guidelines, but it would be interesting to increase fellowships, I think, or grants for artists. That is hard to pursue given the limited amount of funding. I really appreciate what you said, Desmond, about teachers, but definitely every new administration requires a reassertion of the arts and in our communities, the importance of them. But I really do believe that if we can somehow get the money into the hands of the artists, we'll have that felt. It would be also interesting. I'm going back to that word, intentional commissions, particularly commissions that address the needs of communities. I'm thinking about the Philadelphia mural project and how that emerged from the Philadelphia Anti-Graffiti Network. Wonderful folks down there who realized that a lot of the kids who were graffitiing were very simply artists, and how can we re-envision their talents in our communities. And so they set up this wonderful program where community members indicated what kind of murals they wanted in their neighborhoods. And those kinds of visions where artists are an integral part of one's community. I mean, we want to give artists room to follow whatever inspires them in whatever projects. But I also think finding ways in which the artist can be as functional as one's local carpenter or one's local pizza shop, you know. Speaking of which, you know, Dave Eggers' 826, I would like to see something like that in the state of Vermont, where there's after-school programming centered around writing that is designed for young people. So whatever sparks new visions of engaging the arts with community, I'm all about that.
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to repeat the question?
I think I would just go back to what I was saying about building a long relationship with the artist. Once you decide to give the money, just understand that this moment where there is an interest in all things Black and our struggle, like this is not a moment for us. And our work will continue to reflect what we've been going through for centuries. So know that we need your support now, but we also need it as our country evolves, as we go in a different direction. Like our work will continue based on our experiences, and we will need you to be there throughout that, beyond the moment of whatever this is. So continued support would be so appreciated.
I would echo both Major and Felicia and say bigger thinking always, more daring thinking, more revolutionary thinking.
Yeah. I love that, like revolutionary thinking. I think for me, I think that we need like a contemporary arts space, gathering space. And I know that like there is, that JAG has like this gift of gathering people, right? Like, you know, people come and they see the show, but a lot of that engagement, right? When we don't have like an education program, et cetera, is people coming to learn as well as to see a really beautiful show, you know? And I'm really interested in like moving beyond that and having a space where like, yes, you can come and experience theater, but like also like, what are multiple ways at which this work moves beyond the stage? Like, how are we like engaging with each other before? What are ways at which other organizations and other companies that are doing like similar work, like how can we have a space where we can gather and do this work together so that it doesn't feel so isolated and like one person is doing their thing, I show up in a space and make something happen, we tear it all down, it belongs to someone else. Like, what are ways at which we have a space to continue to move this work forward with multiple people that are similarly doing the same kind of work in this moment?
It's funny you say that. As you were talking, I was thinking about, you know, one of the common noun features of any performance is the post-performance discussion. And I always walk away a little like it feels anticlimactic because the performance is just such a bomb moment.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning good, by the way. But then you get the post-performance discussion and it just doesn't live up to the possibilities of the art. And so how do you re-envision what you're talking about is, you know, after the set is taken down, what are the action items to push the values and the vision and match the virtuosity of those particular artists? Like, how is that community going to be changed beyond being entertained?
That's right.
Maybe intellectually engaged afterwards, you know, we can deconstruct and talk about elements of the art. But where's the deep impact happens?
Yeah.
In the post-performance, you know?
That's right.
Part of me wants that to be the domain of funders in the arts and humanities. You know, I think it's these kinds of organizations are already in that position to bring different groups and peoples together. But part of me is also like really reticent to let that enormous responsibility fall into the hands of predominantly white institutions. you know, and I think that the question then is, how do we make them no longer predominantly white? But I'm also like, oh, there's no time.
Right. And how do we, and I think that like part of this space, right? Like, I always tell people that like, oh my God, you know, Vermont's so predominantly white. It's like, you know, that there's work that goes into making something predominantly white. Like Black and brown people have been around for centuries and are everywhere. So it's like, how are we creating space to retain people, to keep people here? Like what are, and I think a space, you know, that is collectively doing that work will help in that process. We are out of time, but I want to get this one question in. As a consumer of the arts, I'd like to see productions from more local institutions like JAG, until we can really be together and see the stories and productions you had created in the past. Do you see a way to create that experience from a distance? As a consumer of the arts, I'd like to see productions from more local institutions like JAG, until we can really be together and see the stories and productions you had created in the past. Do you see a way to create that experience from a distance? I do. I have some thoughts on that. I don't know if I want to share them right now. I have some thoughts. I think that like making things in like a retreat style and summertime and being able to share that like from a distance outside could be an interesting take, but I'm really interested in exploring new work in this moment that is about joy, that can be developed here in Vermont in some space where there is distance, and at the end of that process be able to sort of share it with community members, et cetera. So I've been thinking about, you know, what are ways to bring us together like outside.
I have been during the shelter in place checking out the productions of Theater of War. They did King Lear, they did Oedipus, and I would imagine, and great actors, it felt more than just the script in hand reading, but I just felt like whoever is like the production manager is really making Zoom into this like this amphitheater experience, you know. So I do feel like, you know, again, we're in a moment of shifting. Those folks are going to be relied upon. But going back to something that you said earlier about Vermont, and you know, the arts are we've been kind of messaging this a little bit in various ways, but it has the potential here in this state to kind of transform and become a true kind of destination, both for artists as well as for those who kind of seek out experiences. And I think this is the moment where companies like JAG, I think, can really potentially find various ways of doing what it does best in multiple platforms. So I'm just going to plug y'all and send great wishes that particularly that question guides, because the more people you can reach both within state and out is going to be really transformative for both the artists and the company and the community. Just love.
I think you've been doing it already, actually, Jarvis, showing performances like maybe in this time, since we probably won't be able to attend live theater in the fall, have a virtual season and have subscribers and have people get together with their families in their homes and actually attend your theater piece through Zoom. And maybe that's how, you know, hopefully by the time JAG does come, we'll be out of this, but if not, have the same thing happen virtually and charge tickets, maybe not the same price as in person, but if we have to move our entire season to be virtual, then that's what we have to do. Doesn't mean that the season stops.
I have a plug for people that want to support JAG or funders in general. An idea came to us to do a radio play of East Side's Table, which is a show that we did this past fall, and we're trying to get this thing going. And we have some really interesting ideas to how to make this. Yes, we kind of launch it, but like, how can like this radio play of East Side's Table be in communities across the country as we are, in this idle time? Well, we're not idling, we're working before we bring the production to New York. So I have a budget. I know what the number is. So if folks are interested in hearing more about how to bring this radio play to life and or this retreat style play that I'm thinking about developing, please reach out. Desmond?
Can I add to that just very quickly?
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot of free Zoom events, and I'm realizing that that's what they are. So if there's any way that if you are commissioning writers or artists, if you could plug their books or find ways to celebrate their livelihood, appreciate it too.
Major, do you have a book that we should be reading right now?
It's called The Absurd Man. It published several months ago.
The Absurd Men, published several months ago by the incredible, the brilliant, the wonderful, the lovely Major Jackson. Desmond, do you want to answer this question, or is there something that we can support you in right now?
Well, for anybody looking for virtual arts experiences or how to put them on, we've collected a lot of good resources about that on the Vermont Arts Council page, so vermontartscouncil.org. And if you would like to support what we do at Mount Island, you can go to mountisland.com/donate. We're raising money to hold another Lucy Terry Prince Prize next year, and also to put out our first print anthology. So please,
Thank you all. A huge shout out to Vermont Humanities Council. This is the work. They reached out to me and just let me do this. And I think that, and they're also interested in long-term relationships. So it wasn't just about like this Band-Aid, like they came with clear expectations and goals and thoughts about a future. So thank you to the Vermont Humanities Council for reaching out. And thank you all for being here. Love, love, love. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Jarvis. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
thank you so much.
Wow. There is so much beauty in this little small state, so much Black beauty, so much Black joy. I am so full from the conversation this evening. Major Jackson, such a brilliant man. Felicia Swoope, so generous, so gorgeous, so lovely, so talented. Desmond Peeples, this is just, I'm getting a newfound love for my community and Vermont that I didn't have before. So thank you all. Thank you for the people that I don't know yet, that I haven't met yet, that I haven't seen, that are doing this work as well. I'm exhausted, but I'm also encouraged, and I'm really hopeful for the future. Thank you. Thank you.